Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be finally updating my 2024 presidential election prediction for the first time in about a month. This is my first prediction for the race to the White House after Tim Walz was announced as Kamala Harris's running mate. It's the first time since the Democratic National Convention that I've made a prediction. Yeah, I'm recording this on the night of August 31st. I'm planning to put this out tomorrow morning, September 1st. We'll see how it goes, but it'll probably be seen this as my early September prediction in all cases. It really is. But this race has gotten very interesting. In the past month or so, Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential race, which basically you would think would have caused a lot of disorganization and chaos on the Democratic side. But surprisingly speaking, Kamala Harris really locked down the nomination within 24 hours and has since taken a lead over Trump, leading him by about 2 points nationwide. Now, what I will say is that presidential polling's a little bit harder to. It's better to look at the individual battleground states, which we also have polling for. I recently released my adjusted polling averages, which account for like 2022 polling errors. I think I put that on my community tab if you guys want to check that out. But either way, Democrats can still win the popular vote by around 2 points, like Hillary Clinton did, and still lose the election. What I will say too is that in 2022, Republicans won the generic congressional ballot by 3 points because of their very strong performances in New York and California, but still ended up with a razor thin majority. So, the popular vote doesn't exactly skew towards Democrats as much as it used to. It's not a perfect representation of the electoral college for either side. I think that there is, a chance that it skews towards either party. Obviously, Democrats have more history with doing better in the popular vote, but it is nonetheless interesting. But Harris generally has become the favorite to win, the election. Most polls show her ahead, doing much better than President Biden ever did. She's tied in Nevada, according to RCP. She's ahead in Michigan, down nearly in Arizona and Georgia and North Carolina, but leading in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. So she's doing a lot better, whereas Biden was losing pretty much all of those states back in, just a couple of months ago. Obviously, polling had a chance to underestimate Democrats, but it also has a chance to underestimate Republicans this cycle. So, it's a double, it's a two, what's the word? It's just as likely the Democrats get a polling error in their favor as Republicans overperform the polls. So as you can see, I filled out these safe states for both parties. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz get 191 safe votes, or safe electoral votes, but Donald Trump and J.D. Vance get about 107 safe electoral votes. I will add in some quick, likely states that are bordering on safe: Kansas, South Carolina, and Alaska. These three I don't really think I really need to spend much time talking about. I really get into the weeds sometimes with these likely states, and it ends up making my presidential election prediction videos longer. These are not the only three likely states, but these three I think are close enough to safe where I don't really need to talk about them. Alaska's a little bit closer. I could see Alaska being, narrower than 2020, which would put it basically on the verge of being state Trump wins by only single digits. So it's not quite super close to safe, but by probability, it's very close, and I don't really think I need to talk about it. There's an interesting House race there with the Democrat Mary Peltola, but that's for an updated House prediction. Anyways, that's it for that. Also, I will go over, I will give Trump and Vance Iowa and Ohio. These are two very right-trending states that have become even more Republican, have gone from being hyper-competitive swing states in the Rust Belt in the 2000s and 2010s to voting pretty solidly Republican in the last decade. There's an interesting Senate race in Ohio with Sherrod Brown running for re-election, so it does really matter how much Trump wins the state by, because it could push Bernie Moreno, the GOP nominee, over the finish line, which would give Republicans a major boost in their quest to flip Senate control. But that race is very tight. The presidential race, however, in the same polls that show Sherrod Brown comfortably leading Moreno by like 5 or 6 points, Trump is demolishing Harris. So there is some, legitimacy to the notion that Brown could win, could get a huge ticket split in that Senate race, but nonetheless, that is a subject for another video. Iowa, there's not really much to talk about here. It's a similar state to Ohio, a little bit redder, no Senate race here this year. I think it'll shift to the right more than Ohio. I think Ohio will vote for Trump by like 9, whereas Iowa will vote for Trump by, I'm going to say, 11. So yeah, I don't, Kamala Harris is, I think, even worse for the demographics in these states, the white working class voters, than Joe Biden was. She could do all right in Cleveland and some of the suburban areas around Ohio, but in the areas where it really matters, she's not going to do too well. But she doesn't really have to. Ohio's not a super competitive state anymore. Also, Maine's 2nd congressional district, another area, white working class area, that has shifted away from Democrats. This voted for Democrats pretty much the entirety of since Maine started splitting its electoral votes. Al Gore won it, John Kerry won it, Obama won it twice. And then in 2016, as Maine at large narrowed up, Trump won the district by 10 points, and he won it in 2020 by 7 points. And what's interesting is for the last 6 years, Democrats have had an incumbent here, Jared Golden, who's one of the most, I was going to say progressive, one of the most moderate Democrats in the lower chamber. He looks on track to win re-election. He, won on the same ballot as Trump in 2020 pretty convincingly. So that is another interesting, case of a red state Democrat or red district Democrat. A red state Democrat would be Brown. But I think Trump wins it by a slightly larger margin than he did 4 years ago. I'd say it's like 9 or 10 points. I think it's close to his 2016 numbers here. But yeah, long term, this district isn't gone for Democrats. Like, they can still win it, obviously, on the House level and even on the state, on the the local level. But nationally speaking, I think it's pretty much gone for them. And then we're going to get into our likely Democratic states. Also we have Florida. Florida is the final likely red state. It's voted for Trump by 3 points in 2020 after voting for him by only a point in 2016. The Miami-Dade area is shifting very far in favor of the Republicans. They've really captured a lot of the Cuban and Venezuelan voters in this area. They've really done well with Hispanic voters in Florida, and they've made improvements all across the country, but in Florida, I think it's been the most pronounced. Although you could argue Rio Grande Valley too, but that's besides the point. Florida overall Republicans had a really good year here in 2022. In some of the some of the interim elections in the last 2 years, we've seen Democrats win back the Jacksonville mayor, the mayorship, or the mayor's office of Jacksonville, the mayorship. My God. And I think that, Harris can do well in Tampa and all these other, in Orlando, and maybe do better than Biden in Miami-Dade, than Biden would have in 2024, to clarify. But she's still going to lose the state by 7 to 8 points, and I think Trump's going to continue to make gains in Florida. So that's it for the likely Republican states. We'll go on to the likely Democratic states now. New Mexico, Maine at large, both pretty comfortable Biden 2020 states. Both voted for him by roughly, New Mexico by 11, Maine by 9. I could see Maine getting a little bit closer, maybe an 8-point margin, but it's still pretty close. It's still pretty, strong. New Mexico, I think, stays about the same. Not a lot of movement there. We'll also put in Minnesota. Of course, this is Tim Walz's home state, and so he's going to give Democrats an uphill boost here. Also, I don't know if J.D. Vance is necessarily going to give Republicans a boost in Ohio. He only won his Senate race by like 6 points, so he could honestly bring the margin down here in Ohio, but I honestly think it doesn't really make a difference. I think Trump is still, a very strong candidate for this state. Anyways, getting back to Minnesota, it just made me think with the home state advantage of the VP nominees. But Walz, not an exceptional candidate here. Obviously, his 2022 race shows that he has succumbed, or his performances, his crossover support has decreased in the age of increased polarization. And so he got very similar numbers to Joe Biden in 2020, but nonetheless, he certainly locks down the state for the Democrats. This was a state that they were worried about under Joe Biden. And very briefly, in the first maybe week or two after Harris became, the presumptive Democratic nominee, when Tim Walz was announced as the VP, it was pretty much guaranteed that they were going to carry the state. But it hasn't voted for a Republican since 1972, I want to say. Yeah, Nixon was the last Republican to win it. It's certainly gotten, some of the white working class areas have gotten a lot redder. But the suburbs have gotten bluer, very typical case of Trump era, trends in the suburbs and the rural areas. And the urban areas have kind of, either gotten bluer or gotten redder, depending on where you look. But Minnesota, very interesting state politically, but not going to be super competitive for this election cycle. Nebraska's 2nd congressional district. This is another suburban seat that has a Republican in the House, Don Bacon, who's in a very close race for re-election. Democrats lost this district by just 2 points in 2016, and then flipped it. Biden won it by 7 in 2020. I think that the margin could get a little bit higher here because voters here in the Omaha region, very similar to suburban areas like the Minneapolis suburbs, Denver suburbs, Virginia suburbs, and Phoenix suburbs, Nova suburbs for Virginia, in which they don't really like the Trump, the Trump kind, or Trump type of Republican. Geez, I cannot speak today. I'm recording this at like 9 o'clock at night, so I'm a little tired from my day. But either way, I think that Harris is going to ride that level of dissatisfaction with Trump. I think Democrats are going to do very well in this district. It might not be enough to knock off Don Bacon, but we'll have to wait and see. That's a very close race that we'll talk about at another time. Virginia, this is another state that Democrats are really worried about under Joe Biden. He was actually losing Virginia in a lot of the polls. But even though I didn't, in my final Biden versus Trump prediction, I didn't have him losing, Harris doesn't seem to be doing all that well in Virginia. I think these polls are underestimating her. They do show in the Senate race Tim Kaine is crushing Hun Cao, which is not surprising. I mean, Tim Kaine was always going to win that race. But I think Harris, we need more data from Virginia. The Nova suburbs, though, just knowing what we know about the state, the Northern Virginia suburbs that were once super Republican have trended Democratic in a very strong way. Glenn Youngkin kind of cut into those margins in 2021, which helped him win back the state, but he also relied on lower Democratic turnout to defeat Terry McAuliffe. And Democrats are going to improve this year in the Richmond suburbs as well. They'll do well in Fredericksburg, in the Charlottesville area, because it's got the University of Virginia around there, and it's going to be a very strong, and with a new Democratic nominee at the top of the ticket, it's going to excite young voters. I think Harris is going to bring out a lot of those voters. She'll do okay in Hampton Roads, but overall, Virginia, I didn't see it going to Trump under Biden, and I don't see it now. Harris might win it by a point or two less, 8 or 9 points compared to Biden 4 years ago, but Trump's just a very unpopular candidate in Virginia, and Virginia Democrats have had a strong last 2 years of success. They did pretty well in 2022, although not amazing, and then they did really well last year in the state legislative elections. They won both chambers of the General Assembly. So, Virginia Democrats, they had a bit of a bad year in 2021, but they've really come back and seem to climb back to their numbers pre-Youngkin. And then finally in New Hampshire, 4 electoral votes. Donald Trump's a terrible candidate for New Hampshire. We know this. He lost it by 7 points in 2020. He couldn't even win it in 2016. This is one of the few states where polling really didn't overestimate Clinton all that much. Similar to Nevada, although not exactly the same because Nevada overestimated Trump. But Clinton, didn't really suffer a polling miss here or suffer from a polling inaccuracy here. And New Hampshire does not like incumbent presidents. I was a little worried. I think Democrats were likely to be a little worried about the state under Biden because Trump was doing very well in polling here. I still think Biden would have won it because Trump's just so unpopular here. But Harris being the candidate, she's different. She's able to separate herself from Biden, and I think she's been doing that effectively, and some of the polls that we found have shown her doing much better than Biden in this state. So I really do think that we're going to see New Hampshire, remain a 7 to 8 point victory for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. So then we get down to the remaining 133 electoral votes. We're going to go from west to east here. We'll start off in Nevada, go to Arizona, Texas, go around the Sun Belt, and then finish off in Wisconsin. So these 7 states, or 8 states, I guess, really, are the states that I really could see going either way. Some of these are closer than others, but I think that if you had to make me choose which states are the most important to winning the election, it would come down to these ones. So we'll start off at Nevada, which I'm going to give to Kamala Harris. Nevada is a state that almost always is close, but usually votes for Democrats. Democrats are doing very well in the Senate race here with Jackie Rosen. It's surprising the amount of ticket splitting that we're seeing in some of these polls. I do think it's exaggerated. I don't think Rosen's going to do 10 points better than Harris. I expect that the polls will start to reflect that by Election Day, although it won't be perfect. And so I think Harris is doing pretty well in some of these polls. Emerson has her up in their most recent poll. Insider Advantage has Trump only up by 1. Fox News has Harris up by 2. Bloomberg has Harris up by 4. New York Times Siena did have, a couple weeks ago, did have Trump leading by 1. They were a very good pollster. They got this race. They had a tie here in the Senate race in 2022, and Catherine Cortez Masto won by about a point. So they were very good in Nevada and in a lot of Senate races across the country 2 years ago. But I think that Nevada, while Democrats are starting to show signs of struggling with the white working class voters in Clark County, where Las Vegas is, I think Harris brings a new level of energy, a new level of enthusiasm to the Democratic base. I think that the fact that she's supporting Trump's pitch to get rid of taxes on tips is going to help a lot of these service workers here in Las Vegas, and she'll do well in Washoe County, which is a suburban area that has trended against Republicans in the Trump era. So I think she's, I think Trump will also do very well with rural turnout, better than Laxalt or Joe Lombardo in 2022. And I think that Harris is going to hold her ground, and I think that she's going to narrowly win Nevada. Then we go to Arizona, which I'm also going to give to Harris. Arizona's just been a terrible state for the Republicans. They've been able to hold. They have lost 3 consecutive Senate races in a row. They're on track to lose a 4th, and they've lost significant ground in the last 8 years. And whoops, that was an ad that just popped up. But polling here is still insisted that Trump is the favorite in this state, despite there being an abortion referendum on the ballot, or a pro-choice referendum on the ballot, which is going to help Democrats up and down the ballot in the Grand Canyon state. But right now, if you look back to 2022's polling errors, you can also see similar issues with Blake Masters leading in the governor's race, Carrie Lake leading pretty comfortably in the governor's race, and Blake Masters leading in the Senate race. Obviously, I think there's also a chance the Democrats are overestimated here. But Arizona, just knowing its history and how toxic the Trump brand has been to Republicans here, and Maricopa County, just very much a left-trending area, and the state overall getting more diverse, less white, has really resulted in Democrats doing very well in this state. So I think that Trump, just because of how bad of a candidate he is going to lose Arizona for a second time. I don't think it's a big surprise. He could win it. It's a toss-up. It's in the tilt column for a reason. But I would say I'm more confident that Harris wins Arizona than I am her winning Nevada. Then we go to Texas. This is one that I think you could make an argument for likely. I don't really see Harris winning it. I mean, I really, I don't think it has nearly as strong of a chance of going either way as, say, even a state like Michigan, or Georgia or Arizona or Nevada. I think it's definitely the easiest call of all of these states for me. But Texas has definitely gotten closer over the last 20 years. It voted for Bush by strong margins in the 2000s. In 2008, it voted for McCain by 12 and Romney, by 16 in 2012. But then you look at 2016 and you see Trump starting to win it by less. He wins it by 9, then 5.6. The Rio Grande Valley really helped Democrats or Republicans keep their margin afloat in Texas. I think that they'll continue to make some gains in this area. They won't be nearly as pronounced as the shifts that we saw from 2016 to 2020. And I think Harris, in some aspects, can stop the bleeding in these areas. I think that she'll do all right she'll continue to build off of Biden's gains in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, the Austin metro area, San Antonio, and she'll do okay in Houston. I think the big issue for Democrats in Texas is really getting strong numbers out of Houston, getting strong turnout, and we really haven't seen that in the last couple of election cycles. So I think, we'll see that. I think Colin Allred has a close race against Ted Cruz, but again, I'm pretty confident that Cruz would win that election if held today. I think by probability, Texas is likely. By margin lean, I think Trump wins by around 4 to 5 points. But not impossible for Harris to come back and win it. This has been a state that we've seen move in a very similar direction to how Arizona and Georgia moved, showing how competitive these states were getting. I think that the same applies to Texas. It's just a lot trickier because it's a bigger state. There's a lot more variables to look at it. To look for in its electorate, and I think that's part of why it stayed so stubbornly red. It's not where a situation in Arizona or Georgia where Democrats can just go to one big metro area and its surrounding areas and just focus on that. They really have to look at all these regions in this huge state. And I think that's really what's holding them back. But whenever, eventually Democrats are going to start to build off of their numbers in Texas so much that the Rio Grande Valley is not going to be able to keep Republicans afloat anymore. But that year has not yet come, and I don't think it's going to come this year. So then we get to Georgia. I previously had this state as a lean or a tilt. I had it as lean R under Biden, my final Biden versus Trump prediction. I had it as tilt Republican in my last Harris versus Trump prediction. Jesus Christ, I need to, I wish that those ads wouldn't come up. I'm sorry about that. But I'm starting to move Georgia over into the tilt Democratic column. I think Harris is the right candidate to win Georgia. I think that she is a strong candidate for getting out college town voters in Athens, or young voters in college towns, like Athens, Savannah, Augusta, and turning out people in the Atlanta metro area. I think that she can make the case for, she can really, she's done a very good job of, putting together that Republicans for Harris group, so she'll be able to win over some disaffected GOP voters that Biden was able to win over, and maybe some that he really wasn't. But I think that she's she, like Raphael Warnock, has the needed strength with some of these demographics, these Asian American voters, these African American voters, with the Democratic base to get to that point where she can win, and then also manage to win over those independent voters that are necessary for a victory in Georgia. I think Trump has really driven away a lot of voters. I don't think it's as catastrophic as of a state for him as Arizona has been in terms of trends, but the Atlanta suburbs are getting a lot bluer. I think the only real upside Trump has here is hoping he gets really strong rural turnout, which is likely, and hoping that Harris, falls with, in Sanford Bishop's district in Southwest Georgia, which is predominantly black, but is getting redder as the population gets wider. But again, I think that this is a very close state. I'm going to give it to Harris right now, because I think I've looked over it so many times. It's so much easier for me to draw a scenario where Harris wins the state, even if it's narrow, than where Trump wins the state. I think that's where I really stand on it right now. Then I'm going to give Trump North Carolina. There's been a lot of talk about North Carolina being bluer than Georgia. I don't buy it. I could see it because it has happened before in history, but in the last 4 years we've seen the exact opposite happen. I mean, you look at the 2020 election results, North Carolina voted for Trump, Georgia for Biden. You look at the Senate races 2 years in a row, Georgia Democrats won both of the Senate runoffs. North Carolina, Tom Tillis won re-election, surprisingly. And then in 2022, Warnock gets re-elected. Ted Budd wins the open Senate race in North Carolina. So we've seen in the last couple of years, Democrats do a lot better in Georgia than in North Carolina. Now, in terms of demographics, North Carolina could become like Georgia, but there's a black turnout problem in the state, and I think that that's really what's hindering Democrats here. Now, what does help, the party here is the governor's race, which is likely to go to Attorney General Josh Stein. He's a very strong candidate. He's won twice with Trump on the ballot, and he's crushing Mark Robinson, the Republican lieutenant governor, in the polls right now. Robinson's a very controversial candidate, but overall, governor's races are more localized. They're different than Senate races and or presidential races, federal races is the better way to put it. And Trump, I think for the same argument that Nevada is always close but votes Democratic, North Carolina is similar. It's always close but it almost always votes for the Republicans. Democrats can get close here, but getting that 1 to 2 points that they need to really win it is just almost impossible. It's just very, very hard. It's Herculean. So I think that that's really what's going to limit them here. I don't really see a reason to believe in them this election cycle when, over a state like Georgia where we actually have seen Democrats, carve out some victories, or take some victories here. And so, we get up to the Rust Belt. We have 44 electoral votes left, 3 states left. I'm going to give Harris the state of Pennsylvania, which is going to put her over the top at 278 electoral votes. Pennsylvania, really, I think a lot of people have determined is the most important state. I would agree with that. I mean, it's the biggest swing state. It has 19 electoral votes. Harris has finally taken a lead in the RCP average in Pennsylvania, and I use the RCP average, just to show you guys the polls. I don't regard them as gospel. I actually make my own adjusted polling averages, based on, the 2022 polling errors, but you guys know that. I already said that. And Harris is leading in most of these polls. Emerson has it as a tie. Trafalgar has it as only Trump +2. Bloomberg has it as Harris +4. Pennsylvania was a state that Biden was really struggling in. In the Rust Belt, I think it was his worst state in the Rust Belt by the time he dropped out. And Harris wasn't doing super well here either. I think that she really has some issues when it comes to her previous positions on fracking. I think Tim Walz, he may not be Josh Shapiro, he might not be the governor of the state, but he definitely provides that Midwestern appeal that Harris needs to win over this region. And I think that that's really what's going to help put her over the top here. I think she's going to do well with black voters in Philadelphia. I think she's going to do, she's going to lose a little bit of ground here in, Scranton and Lackawanna County. but she'll do okay in Allegheny and Pittsburgh. She'll do okay in Harrisburg, and she'll do okay in the Philly suburbs. And maybe she'll even, I think she could win the state without winning Erie County, although it's more likely than not that that is the bellwether county of the state, and Hampton, of course, which I think she'll win. So, yeah, the Lehigh Valley is also another very important area here. But I think Joe Biden would be most useful if you get him on the campaign trail to stay in Pennsylvania, because that is his state of birth. I think that it's a state where he really was able to do uniquely well in 2020, despite only winning it by a point. But he got the job done, and I think that this is a state where he could really rely on his hometown appeal to help deliver the state for Harris. And so then, I'm not going to dance around the fact. I'm going to give these last two states to Harris: Michigan by a lean margin, Wisconsin by a tilt margin. And as you can see here, this is a repeat of the 2020 map. Of course, redistricting makes the state, makes the electoral vote count a little bit narrower. Harris gets free less than Biden did, and Trump gets free more than he did 4 years ago. But Michigan is a state that I was always pretty confident in Biden winning, even amid the outcry about his handling of the Israel-Hamas war. Because it's the bluest of these states. It's the most, it's the one that Hillary Clinton lost by the least amount, by the narrowest amount in 2016, and overall, just the situation for Democrats is just a lot better in Michigan than it is in a state like Wisconsin or Pennsylvania. It's still very competitive, but Democrats have really excelled here in the last 6 years. They've won the governorship twice. They've won a pair of Senate races, and they've won the state in 2020 by a pretty decent margin, even though Trump did pretty well in Michigan. So I think that it's a state that I'm pretty confident that Harris will win as long as she does well in Grand Rapids, does well in Lansing, and gets black voters out in Detroit, which I doubt will be a problem. And does okay in the Detroit suburbs and the white working class voters, and Saginaw and Lansing and Macomb and Genesee County. So I think that will be, she'll be okay there. But it is still a state that Trump really can, appeal to. It's another Rust Belt state, another white working class state. But I think that this is a state. But I think that Harris is favored here for right now, and I don't think that that's too much of a stretch. Then we go to Wisconsin, another Rust Belt state where Harris is currently leading in the polls. She's been doing very well here. She's actually overperforming her Pennsylvania polls, which is common for Democratic presidential candidates. I mean, Hillary Clinton was doing better in Wisconsin in the polls than she was in Pennsylvania in 2016. But of course, the opposite ended up being true. And a similar case of Biden in 2020, he was up in Wisconsin by like 8 or 9. He's only up in Pennsylvania by 5. And what do you know? Pennsylvania's slightly bluer than Wisconsin. So I think Wisconsin's the closest of these states. Of these Rust Belt states, I think overall in the entire election, Georgia's the closest. But Wisconsin, this is a state where Trump will definitely gain with white working class voters in the Driftless area. I think Harris will do okay in Dane County and continue to build on Biden's win here, and Democrats' 2022 victory. Massive margins here, Democrats' massive margins in Dane County in 2022, and then I think she'll continue to build on the Milwaukee margins, which are the two biggest vote dumps for Democrats in the state. And she'll do okay in, Green Bay and the Milwaukee suburbs and the Dayton suburbs. And so I think that overall it's just easier to, draw a Harris map in a Harris victory in Wisconsin than it is for a Trump map. It's not impossible. I could see Trump very much winning this state. It's his best, play in the entire Rust Belt region. For a competitive state to win of these three blue wall states. But I think Wisconsin ultimately it does go for Harris, and I think that that's it. I think Tim Walz was a very good pick for Wisconsin. I think that it being a state that borders his home state, a very similar state demographically. I think that it is a state where he provides a unique appeal, and I think you'll probably see him in this state quite a lot, and I think that that's going to really help Democrats here. They also have a Senate race where Tammy Baldwin, the incumbent Democrat, is really outrunning her, GOP opponent, and I think that she could drag Harris over the finish line, but again, there could be a ticket split here. So that is my not my final prediction. We are getting close, honestly, to the end of this election cycle, which is a little sad, but also exciting because at a certain point you kind of want to, start, looking at a new map. But either way, this prediction, the final vote count, electoral breakdown, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz win with 303 electoral votes. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance lose, but they win 235 electoral votes. And we see a repeat of the 2020 map, slightly smaller with some of the margins in these states. Texas and North Carolina narrow up, Pennsylvania slightly narrows up, and so does Nevada. But overall, similar result. I don't know if this will be the result that will, my final prediction in November, or even the results in November. I do think this race is closer than it was in 2020, even though I have the same map. And that is because of, slight Republican trends in New York and California. But I also think that these states just are slightly more in favor of Trump than they were 2 years ago or 4 years ago in some cases. But I think that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the prediction. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy it, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Share it with someone who you think would enjoy it, and tell me who you think is going to win this election. Do you think I'm completely wrong and Trump's going to win it pretty decisively, or do you think it's going to be a closer race? Or do you, agree with me and think that it's going to be, a pretty clear Harris victory, but still, not super decisive? I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your your take on this race, because it is very close right now, even though this map is pretty clear which candidate I think is favored right now. So let me know. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.